Hey there, this is Jamie from Stonemaier Games, and I'm so excited because I only do this video twice a year. This is my top 10 favorite games of all time as of right now, March 2023. I do this every 6 months, and the games eligible for this list are games that have appeared as my number 1 or number 2 games on any top 10 list. Not just my top 10 list of all time, but any top 10 list on any theme or any mechanism, any genre. Those are the games that are eligible for this list. As usual, Stonemaier Games, the games that I've designed or worked on as a publisher, as a developer, or as a designer are not eligible for this list, but you will get some mentions of them from our ambassadors. And yeah, let's actually jump into those ambassador picks. I first asked ambassadors to pick what their favorite games are as of right now. And I first asked them for non-Stonemaier games. So let's go through that list real quick. I picked games that appeared multiple times on that list. Many of these appeared at least 3 times on the ambassador list. In alphabetical order: A Feast for Odin, Aeon's End, Agricola, Ark Nova, Brass Birmingham, which recently became the number 1 game on Board Game Geek. Congratulations for that. Castles of Burgundy, Concordia, Dune Imperium, Dwellings of Eldervale, Eclipse, Final Girl, Gloomhaven, Great Western Trail, John Company 2nd Edition, Magic the Gathering, Marvel Champions, Obsession, Raiders of the North Sea, Sleeping Gods, Spirit Island, Splendor, Star Wars Rebellion, Terra Mystica, Terraforming Mars, Too Many Bones, Twilight Imperium 4th Edition, and Wayfarers of the South Tigris, one of the newest games on this list. I also asked ambassadors separately to pick their favorite Stonemaier game right now. I make games. I know that a lot of ambassadors are Stonemaier ambassadors because they love our games. So I wanted to give them the opportunity to choose a Stonemaier game for this list. And with a whopping 68 respondents selecting this game, 68 people selected Scythe as their number 1 favorite Stonemaier game. 36 people selected Wingspan as their favorite Stonemaier game. 29 selected Tapestry, and 19 selected Viticulture. Of course, we have 10 other games right now. The 11th Expeditions is coming out later this year. But those were the top 4 picks from ambassadors. And those were all the only games that were picked more than 5 times. My honorable mentions are Seven Wonders Duel, Cartographers, Castles of Mad King Ludwig, Fantasy Realms, Isle of Cats, Lords of Waterdeep, Magic the Gathering, Marvel Dice Throne, Mysterium Park, No Thanks, Orleans, which I played I wanted to play just the other day, but found that the copy that we had didn't go up to 5 players, Russian Railroads, Scotland Yard, Sushi Roll, Terra Mystica, Tzolk'in, and the Guild of Merchant Explorers. All right, so let's talk about my top 10. I own only 4 of these games. I love these games, but I actually only own 4 of them. So my top 10, and I'll talk about a few things that I love about these games. Number 10, Space Base. If you follow this channel, you've probably seen Space Base show up a number of times on this list. Space Base is a mostly simultaneous game where one player is rolling 2 dice, and all players are using those dice to activate certain abilities of cards that they have in their card row, cards numbered from 1 to 12. So it's an interesting game where the curve of the dice, because for a specific reason, the curve of the dice doesn't necessarily mean that playing 6, 7s, and 8 value cards out of the 1 through 12 spectrum are better, because you can choose to activate the sum of the dice or each die individually. And so it actually means that cards numbered 1 through 6 are the most powerful. It's much harder to activate cards 10, 11, or 12. But I love in this game that you are participating in every turn. Games like this and the next game make me want to make more simultaneous action games, or really make any. I don't think I have any games that are fully simultaneous where all players are participating in every turn. I think Space Base does that so well. It feels good every time to play, whenever I play Space Base, and I like that I can even choose my difficulty as I play, because there's certain cards that are a little bit more difficult than others to work around, but you don't have to choose those cards. You can buy other cards instead. So yeah, Space Base is my number 10. Another space-themed game. In fact, I have several space-themed games on this list, even though I consider myself a little bit more of a fantasy person. But at number 9, Planet Unknown. It's one of the newer games on this list. This is another simultaneous game where all players are selecting some polyomino tiles based on I don't know the modern term for this, but it's a lazy Susan, where you're turning around this big circular display of tiles, and the active player is turning it facing them, and they can choose one of 2 tiles, and all other players get to choose whatever from the 2 tile types that are facing them, that are oriented towards them at that moment. You choose one of those tiles and simultaneously place it on your planet mat. You have this big planet mat that you're building. Planet Unknown does something that I love in games, which is that it includes double rewards on every turn. In fact, it often includes triple rewards because you're placing the tile, that's one reward, that feels good. And then based on the 2 different icons, colors on that tile, you are moving up 2 different tech tracks. And so really it's triple benefits. I think that's the reason I keep coming back to this game. Plus it flows really well even at higher player counts. But the idea that on every turn, you are being rewarded multiple times. You're being rewarded by a tile and by moving up 2 tracks. And oftentimes those 2 tracks give you other benefits. So you kind of are spooling into these other benefits as you play. Feels really good. I love games that are rewarding for players. And I often return to them time and time again. Planet Unknown is one such game. And number 8 is a game that I do own. That game is Role Player. Role Player is a game where you are using a puzzly element involving dice and some cards to create an RPG character. I've talked about how my favorite mechanism of the game is actually at the beginning of the game during setup. You're rolling a bunch of dice and putting them on your character from the very beginning. And that's kind of deciding certain abilities that you won't get to use as often as other abilities. But it sets you up really well for success and gives you a strong sense of endowed progress in the game. But I just love everything about the game. I love the idea that you're building this character. I love the different puzzle of where to place dice, where you want colors and numbers in certain spaces. You're moving around this little, well, that's not the backstory. The backstory is somewhere else. But you have these different characteristics that are building this character. So thematically, I really like it. But also mechanically, I just really, really enjoy the puzzle of Role Player. And yeah, I am just always happy to return to this game. And even though it's not on my list, Role Player Adventures, kind of the sequel to this game, the campaign sequel to this game, is a wonderful game that I also truly, truly love. I didn't put any campaign games on this list because I think of my favorite games as those that I return to time and time again, but I really do love Role Player Adventures too. And number 7 is a game that I don't own yet, but the Kickstarter, I think, or the Game Found is arriving fairly soon as far as I know, and that is Ra. Ra is my favorite auction-themed game. Because it involves a little bit of a push your luck element. I love a little bit of push your luck, in that you never know exactly when a round is going to end in Ra. You can try to, in Ra, you are trying to acquire some tiles, and it's an auction game, but there's no currency. You just have 3, sometimes 4 tiles with a number on them, a unique number, and you can decide on any given auction if you want to use one of those tiles, and that tile enters the auction for the next auction round. And so you only have, the currency in the game are these 3 or 4 tiles, depending on the player count. So I like how simple and streamlined that is. But you're also deciding at any given time, is this the auction that I want to try to win, or do I want to wait till later? But the risk of waiting till later, as the game has, the benefit is that you might pile up more tiles to gain in a single auction. That can be really good. But the risk is that the round just might end, because you're drawing random tiles from a bag, and if a certain number of raw tiles are drawn from that bag, the round automatically ends. You can't do anything else. You can end a round without winning any auctions in Raw. I love that push your luck mechanism in the game, and just the idea, the feeling of getting these tiles, having not too much complication with the currency in terms of the auctions, feels really good. I can't wait to get the new edition from 25th Century Games of Raw. That's my number 7 favorite game right now. The number 6 game is a game that I probably should own at some point, but a friend has a fully decked out version of the Quacks of Quedlinburg, and so we often just play that version. That's another game on this list with simultaneous actions, because in Quacks of Quedlinburg, it's a bag building game where over the course of either 9 or 10 rounds, I can never remember, you are drawing tokens out of a bag until you bust. So it also has push your luck, another mechanism that I just mentioned that I love. Until you bust or until you stop. And that happens at the same time as all other players. You're simultaneously drawing these tokens from the bag and adding them to your potion, this potion that you're brewing. And you're kind of deciding how far do I want to push my luck in doing this. And you're also deciding at the end of each round, which tokens do I want to add to my bag? Which new tokens do I want to acquire to brew a better potion in the next round? I just love Quacks. It's also a very rewarding game. And there is even a punishment in Quacks. Like in Raw, there's a punishment too. But in Quacks, even if you bust, you still get to gain either points or currency to buy something and improve your engine, which I think is a great choice to offer players if you bust. That even if you bust, you don't get one of those things, but you still get the other one. Whereas if you don't bust, you only get, you get both of them, which can feel really good too. Number 6, the Quacks of Quedlinburg. And number 5, I had the first of 2 games from the same designer. It has to be one of my favorite designers at this point. And that is Dune Imperium. I love Dune Imperium. Dune Imperium is a deck building game with a really cool deck building mechanism where you're only playing typically 2 cards over the course of the round, and they tie to a worker placement mechanism in the game. But the cards that you don't play matter just as much, because the bottom ability, the bottom benefit on those cards activates at the end of the round. Either helps you acquire more cards typically, or it helps you in the combat arena of the game, because there is a combat that happens at the end of each round. It's a very structured game in that way, but it works really well to have that combat. You know for sure that there's going to be a conflict at the end of each round. It's your decision if you want to participate in it or not. But I love the card play in the game. I love how it ties to the worker placement. I love that points are very scarce in this game. There are only 10 points to get. You can get a few more points, but the end game trigger is 10 points. And so it feels really good when you get a point, opposed to a game like some of the games that I've designed where in Tapestry you can get 300 points in a game. Every individual point doesn't feel as impactful as it does in Dune Imperium. But yeah, and even this game, I think, is so thematically strong too. Not only mechanically strong, but thematically strong, that it made me want to read the book. It made me get excited about the movie. I love when a game does that, when it's so mechanically good and it hints at the theme without spoiling it, that it makes me want to learn more about that world itself, especially with an intellectual property game like Dune Imperium. That's my number 5 favorite game. From the same designer, I actually realized I do own the game from the other designer. It's over on my shelf, but it's a giant box, and that is Clank. I love Clank. The newest version of Clank is Clank Catacombs, and really I'm saying Clank as like the entire Clank brand at this point, because I love the core game. I love the expansions. I really enjoy Clank Catacombs, and I love the Legacy version, Clank Legacy. I love this entire brand. It's been a really, really joyful brand for me to play through. It is also a deck building game where you're playing cards to mostly move around a map, but also acquire more cards to fight some monsters along the way. But I love this idea of deck building with a map that you're moving around. If it counts as a dungeon crawler, it is my favorite dungeon crawl game, because I love the idea of crawling around the dungeon with this fun card play. With the deck that you build every game, it feels very different. There's a strong sense of progression in it, but there's also a which path did I choose this game style of progression, and wondering, okay, if I choose this path, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. There's some surprises along the way, but I know I can chart my path a little bit, and you also have to chart your path back. So like a couple other games on this list, there's a push your luck element to it, in that you're deciding how deep in this dungeon do you want to go before you decide to turn around, grab an artifact, and run back out. Because if you don't get out, you either lose automatically or you don't score 20 extra points for getting all the way out. Clank. I love Clank. I'm always happy to play Clank. It's my number 3 favorite game right now. Number 4 favorite game, I'm sorry. Number 3 is Rumble Nation. And it almost surprised me a little bit that I put this game so high on the list. But this is a game that I just crave to play, and I don't own it. It's very difficult to get. And I almost want a new edition of the game. I think they might be working on a new edition of the game. But it's so good. It's such a streamlined game, and also includes combat, which I don't gravitate towards in games. But in Rumble Nation, there's roughly a map of Japan that you are fighting over, and over the first part of the game, the most of the game, you are rolling 3 dice and using those dice to decide. You're combining them together to decide one location that you're going to place some warriors on, and the other die tells you how many warriors you can place on that location. And once all players have finished this process, they've put all their warriors out on the board over the series of multiple turns, you kind of just run the game. And the game, you run each battle starting with the lowest numbered territory. You decide the victor of that battle, and then the victor of that battle, if they have adjacent territories, they will put reinforcement units in each of those adjacent territories, so they get stronger. So there's a strong reason in the game to go after low-numbered territories, because they are going to be activated first during this activation phase at the end of the game. But there's also a reason to go after the higher-numbered territories. They go up to 12, because they're worth more points. If you win a level 1 territory, or the 1 territory, it's only worth 1 point. If you win the 12 territory, it's worth 12 points. And there is a second place as well. But it flows so well. It's so easy to get to the table, and I just crave playing it. My friend Alex is the one that has it, so I need to remember to ask him to bring it more often. It's a fantastic game. Very streamlined combat, kind of area control game. Rumble Nation. It's fantastic. I highly recommend it. Number 3 game on my list. Number 2 is also a new game for this list. It's raced up the list, and I just find myself craving this game as well, but I own it, and that is Skull King. This is a trick-taking game that does what the crew does, it does what Wizard does, which is, and what the mind does. It has a sense of escalation from round to round. In Skull King, you start out with a hand of 1 card, and you play a 1-card trick. In the next round, you gain 2 cards, and then 3 cards, and so on. And I think for most player counts, it goes all the way up to 10. You play through 10. But this sense of escalation and progression, well, it's not progression, really. You're not getting better at anything throughout the game, but you are getting more. You're getting more cards, and even if you haven't played Skull King in a while, this like onboards you into the game really well and onboards new players into the game really well because the stakes are really low when you're only playing one card. They're low when you're only playing two. And they ramp up to that 10 card phase that feels really powerful and where it's rather difficult to decide in advance to bid how many tricks that you think you'll be able to win that turn or that hand. It's just a lot of fun. I've had fun every time I played Skull King. It's so easy to get to the table. Yeah, it's my number 2 game right now. I don't think I ever thought that a small trick-taking game would get this high on my list, but I'm just having a blast with it. I'm loving Skull King. It makes me want to design a game that has this ramping mechanism. Just as like some of these other games on this list make me want to design a game with push your luck or design a game with simultaneous actions. Finally, though, number 1 is the opposite of Skull King in every way, and that is the big boy Ark Nova, the game about building a zoo. This is by far the heaviest game on this list. It's a game that offers a huge amount of variety through the animal cards that you're playing. I've done a whole video about the things that I learned as a designer from Ark Nova. And I think one of the core things that I talked about, in fact, I did another video about this as well, is this idea that you can clearly see, you can decide intrinsically or mechanically the cards that you want to play in the game. And here's some examples of those cards. And many of them are big and difficult to play, and it takes multiple turns to plan towards them, but you can plan towards them. You can see these are the exact things that I need to do to be able to play this elephant card. And it might take multiple turns to do that, but once you get that payoff of actually playing the card, it feels really, really good. And there are multiple benefits on all the cards. Every card that you play makes it easier to play other cards. They give you one-time benefits. They give you ongoing benefits. They give you income benefits. They give you endgame benefits. There's so many different types of benefits that every card gives you. That means that every card feels really, really good to play. I've never played a game of Ark Nova that felt the same as the previous game. The game has a ton of variability to it, just even in the cards, not even with the different player mats. But I love Ark Nova. I'm so glad that this game came out. Forland did a wonderful job with it. Yeah, it's my number 1 favorite game right now. That's my list. My top 10 favorite games right now. This list will change in 6 months. It changes all the time. My taste in game change. But as of right now, these are my top 10 favorite games. I'd love to hear what your number 1 game is on my list and your number 1 game of all time as of right now. The game that you are most eager to get to the table over and over again right now. Let me know those 2 things. Favorite game from my list and favorite game of all time for you, whether or not it's on my list. Let me know in the comments below. I really look forward to this discussion. Thanks.